Three.
3. Chris, the topic we are going to discuss today is if you could pick anyone from the past or present to play a tabletop RPG with, who would you pick?
Oh, I'd pick you, Andy.
Oh, so you're going with the present then.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris.
And I'm Andy.
I don't know why I decided to drop my last name.
I
Of
know,
course,
I had a
Salisbury-
panicky moment there. Like, are we not doing the last names anymore?
I think I'm just feeling a little informal this morning, I guess is
Okay.
how it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so eagle-eared listeners will pick up that we actually rolled on the table of topics. So I'm pretty excited about this. So Andy and I have been talking about bringing this back. It's been a little bit since we've rolled on the table, and so we actually reached out to just like some community members and asked for some topic ideas. So this one actually I think came in from someone Adam. I won't say his last name just because we didn't clear it with him. But yeah, thanks for everybody who gave us some topics. If you have any ideas,
Code name Adam.
Yeah. And if you have any ideas for topics, feel free to reach out and let us know because we have a few open slots on the table that we still need to fill up. But
Indeed we do.
Yeah, so Andy, before we got on, you had just mentioned that you ran your Band of Blades game. You actually had a session last night.
I did, yes.
Yeah, and how did it go?
It was super fun.
Mhm.
It was the first kind of real game. We had done kind of a session 0 character creation thing, and this was the first real game. Yeah, it was super fun. And there were like some GMing challenges in it that
Mhm.
I need to figure out before the next game. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So what all did you run into then? You alluded to there was like kind of like a rules issue.
What I ran into is the Blades action resolution mechanic.
Yeah.
And the rule book itself, it says here's like the 300,000 modifiers and adjustments that and variables that can go into a die roll, but feel free to just fall back on a really dead simple die roll while you're getting comfortable with the system. And
Mhm.
so I just ignored that advice. And I think the very first action we did, I introduced some things that made it more complex.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it is just a situation. I'm curious if you've run into this with any game really. It's a situation that I knew how I would handle it in D&D or any other game, or a
Mhm.
lot of like another more traditional game. But Blades wants you to do things in a specific way to achieve the specific experience and the specific result it's trying to evoke. And so, I feel this pressure to handle this the way you do it in D&D so we can move on.
Mhm.
But then there's also like, but this game is challenging me. It wants me to do it in this way that feels unintuitive because it thinks it's worthwhile. So maybe we should pause and kind of figure this out. So,
Yeah.
have you had that experience?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you like run into this in real life too. Sometimes you're just like, the thing that I really want right now is a coin flip or a or a die roll to sort of like decide where we're going to go for dinner, right? If you have a couple people that are just like, arguing about like what it is, it's like, oh, it'd be so nice to just like go back to this resolution mechanic, right? For that I use in these games, right?
Yes.
Especially with with blade style games too. Like it feels on the surface like it's going to be a very loose sort of narrative game, but there's like a very rigid, like you alluded to, there's this huge flow chart of information that you're supposed to be sort of going through
Yeah.
to determine, your position and your effect and like all the stuff that goes into it. And you're absolutely right. You can sort of just like, lean lean against like the like sort of the default assumption there, but there's also so much flavor and interesting stuff that happens when you start
Yes.
adding in the like, oh well, this raises your position, this lowers your position, like all that sort of stuff. But then sometimes all you really want is like just roll a d6 and tell me if it was a 3 or above.
Yeah.
It's like, because I need to just sort of tell you what the coin flip is.
And to its credit, there is a mechanic for doing exactly that in Blades. I think it's called like the fortune roll. And it's for when you don't want to mess with anything, you just need to basically do the equivalent of a coin flip.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to be clear, I love what Blades is trying to do. I love it. I absolutely love it. In Blades, you can resolve a fight in like one die roll or 2 if it's like a complicated fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big gain in like efficiency. That buys you more time to do the stuff that matters, like letting the players role play and make cool decisions. But you start to lose the time it saves if you try to pack too much nuance into the die roll, because then you're spending as much time figuring that out as it would take to just do 4 quick rounds of D&D where
Hmm.
you all roll your attack roll and stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, it totally does. Yeah, it's frustrating when you can't sort of rely on that. You just mentioned in like, yeah, you can resolve like a whole combat in one die roll. It's like, yeah, like that part is really cool. And sometimes, I mean, I know I found that myself when I've run Blades in the Dark. Like sometimes you're like, I want this combat to be more sort of mechanically interesting, or like I want more die rolls in it too at the same time. So it's like, yeah, like I think there's like that friction of like kind of changing systems
Yeah.
comes up along with these things.
So anyway, that's something
Yeah.
I got to work with. I was
Yeah.
frustrated because I spent a lot of time reading the rule book
Hmm.
because I knew this part of the game stressed me out.
Hmm.
As much as it is like a neat part of the game experience, I knew it was going to be stressful. And I don't know, I guess all that reading just didn't really convert into like fast decisions at the table. So I just got to noodle on it, I think, between now and the next game.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this. I know for sure on Discord. I think you and I have chatted about this too, about the different ways that people sort of need rules presented to them. I think is something that like more books need to explore a bit. Like so, for me, running Blades in the Dark, someone had put together a flow chart. You know, it was something I found on like I think it was like Google Plus back in the
Yes.
day, right? It
Yep.
was like, you know, you can't get to it anymore, right? So it was sort of getting shared back and forth on like Reddit and like all these other places and stuff. And it's just like this flow chart where someone sort of broke down how to do a die roll in Blades. And it's like I read that book cover to cover 2 times, but the thing that I needed most to run that game was that flow chart, right?
Yep.
And like, yeah, I think there's almost value in creating those things too. It's like if you could sit down and like kind of create the flowchart of what you need, like maybe that helps lock the information in your brain, or just finding it, you know, presented in a different way. But like, yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge to write rules, you know, for a game. Like,
It
yeah, I'm not
is,
not
yes.
discounting that at all. But yeah, sometimes you just like need that information condensed in a different way.
I do think there's a lot more a varied presentation of complicated games today than there
Hmm.
has been in the past, in
Yeah.
that I now rely on YouTube tutorials for board games.
Oh.
I love complicated board games, but when I'm learning a new game, I go and watch a tutorial because there's someone has always done a tutorial, no matter
Yeah.
what game you're thinking of, no matter
Yeah.
how niche it is. There's someone has a like 55-minute video about it. But
Yeah.
and I watch that video and then I read the rules. It's like because my brain, I need the context of how all these systems. I need the big picture, and then I can start reading on page one through
Hmm.
all of the systems in order. And somebody else might have a really different way of understanding rules, but that's
Hmm.
something where like that is a resource that didn't exist 15 years ago, that
Yeah.
I don't know if I could learn some of these complicated games now if I didn't have it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now I'm curious if there is like a Band of Blades like YouTube YouTube video explainer.
There are at least some Band of Blades actual plays, which is in a
Yeah.
game like Blades, like that goes a long way because part
Hmm.
of the big picture is understanding what is the end goal of this game, which is different than the end goal of like D&D. So,
Hmm.
and there's some good Blades in the Dark stuff, some really good Blades in the Dark stuff, actually, some of which is very relevant to Band of Blades. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I guess that's my rambly way of saying, yeah, there's probably some great stuff there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think when I ran Brindlewood Bay last at the last Roll for Topic Con, I went and found an actual play. I think with the actual game designer
Hmm.
himself, like, running an actual play. It was so invaluable to sort of see how he approached stuff. And there were certain things that he didn't do in the game that like was sort of expecting to be part of the game,
Mm,
right? Like I don't know. I just expected there to be more like I don't know, like silly stuff like more character voices or stuff like that. And it
yeah.
turned out that you can run a perfectly good, acceptable game even from like the game designer's perspective, where you're not doing these grandiose character voices or only doing everything role playing, right? It's like, you know, I think it's a real advantage of actual plays, like having just this wealth of information of like, oh, like this is a different sort of style of maybe, you know, what you were getting from even the rule book.
So, okay, before we jump into our topic, just super quick, I just want to do a check in with you because I know you're reading through Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And where are you up to now?
Oh goodness, Andy, I stayed up way too late last night reading Lord of the
Oh,
Rings: Return of the King, which does not happen very often for me because I have you know, kids and responsibilities and stuff. So I'm usually like, I need to put this down, or I'm going to
yep.
regret it later. But I hit I'm in book 6, right? So I'm in the final sort of stretch of it, and I hit the point where Sam and Frodo were like at Mount Doom, and I was like, well, I guess I'm staying up until until the ring is destroyed. Yeah, and just like what a harrowing like last part of their journey that they go on. If you've only ever seen the movies, I think the movies do a pretty good job of sort of describing or like showing just how like beat down and defeated they are. But I mean, like the book just goes into such detail that I could even detail of just like stuff like about how thirsty they were,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the thing that sticks out to me so much is like they had no water at all during like the last day. Sam can't even swallow at one point. Frodo is like all like he is essentially naked too
Yeah.
in that. Again, they didn't show this in the movies because they're cowards, right? But like you know, like he's wearing all he has on is the like the cloak, like the cloak that the elves gave him,
Yeah.
right? And like like Sam's used a little bit of the elvish rope to sort of like tie like his waistband a bit, right? So like they have like nothing by the time they get there, other than Sam has refused to get rid of his little box and the file from Galadriel and stuff, right? So they're like, it's like there's nothing there, and then it's like at that moment too, where that's when Sam realizes that he doesn't actually know what Frodo's plan is,
Hmm.
right? They have gone that entire distance, and like Sam in his head is just like, Frodo's never actually talked about what he's going to do. Like, right? Yeah, like what is he actually going to do once we get to the, like inside
Interesting.
inside
Yes.
Mount Doom? And it turns out that Frodo also really hasn't thought about it, right? It's like he's, yeah. So there's just that whole sequence of Gollum like trying to get the ring back from him, right? And
Yeah.
like Gollum falling in. I don't know. It is just such an affecting part of the story because like I think you can sort of see yourself in all those positions of like of Frodo being like, I don't want to give it up, right? Of Gollum being like, I will die if I don't get the ring back, and like
Yeah.
Sam just sort of stuck in the middle, like watching this thing happen and like not sure what to do, but also willing to go to go to death to like to see it happen too. It's yeah, just a gorgeous sequence in such a dire and dark setting. Anyway, so they've destroyed the ring and now they're kind of back. And I was kind of bawling, bawling while
Oh,
reading it.
it's so
Yeah,
moving. Like it's
yeah,
so emotional. The end of Return of the King. It's
yeah.
yes,
It's just like
incredible.
and from here on out, I know it's just like kind of one thing after another that's gonna have me crying. But I mean, like Sam waking up and like Gandalf is there, and he says like, "Is every sad thing gonna be undone?" And it's
Yeah.
just like,
Oh,
oh,
I know. Oh
like
man.
Sam, oh yeah, yeah. So it is very good. I'm of course enjoying it quite a bit, as
Good.
evidenced by listening to this podcast.
I gotta ask
But
because I mentioned it last episode or an episode or
mhm.
two ago, and I don't know if I'm imagining this. Isn't there a sequence where Sam is tempted by the ring with the vision of creating like a garden? Is that a thing?
Yeah, of creating a garden, yeah, and I think in this, and I think Tolkien adds this is to sort of like really give a flavor of like who the hobbits are, and like who they can be. Is that Sam gets tempted with this vision? I think it's on their way, like maybe on the way up to Mount Doom. I read it
Yeah.
last night, and somewhere in that sequence,
Uh huh.
but of like he has this vision of him taking the ring and like clearing out like Mordor and creating this
Yes.
like large garden. But then he has this sense of like he doesn't want to own a bunch of land and like dictate people to go do gardening for him. Like what he wants is to have his own garden. He wants to be back on the rivers of Bywater. Like like he wants to have his own garden, to be growing his own stuff, and like just the like that sense of, I don't know, like of purpose is just so amazing, because I mean that's what Sam has throughout. He just like has this sense of purpose, and it's very like rooted in who he is, and it's like it's not even like that he's scared to rise above his station so much as it is like he just knows who he is so
Yeah.
well. Like every time I read this, right? I mean, I think everybody has this experience. Like you read and you're like, oh, Frodo, of course, is the hero, but then you read, you're like, no, Sam is the hero. Like this is,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is really Sam's story. Yeah, I mean, and it could, in a lot of ways, be called the Ballad of Samwise, right? It's like yeah, like that vision. I mean, it's just so like he's tempted with this thing that he doesn't actually want,
Yeah.
and I think that's the problem. Is a lot of the other people get tempted by this power fantasy, and they realize that if they entertain it at all, that's all that they would want.
Yeah.
And Sam like looks at that and it's like, oh, I don't want that. Yeah, so it's really good.
To me, that is like a genius level response to a GM tossing the question, which is like, as you look at the ring, you have a brief
Yes,
thought of like what you would do with the ring. Like, tell us
yeah,
about it. And then you get something that is it answers the question and also really illustrates like the character in amazing ways.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, you know, I mean, it is a question I think, you know, as a GM, you should be asking your players more often. Is sort of like, yeah, their deepest desires of the, the character, right? Because I mean, I think for me at least, thinking those things through as I like when I'm playing a character, it's like that's where you really kind of figure out like where their personality is and like what separates them from being a villain, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah, like what makes them a hero and not a villain. Yeah,
yeah.
because like I mean, Sam had every opportunity to just like you know off Frodo, grab the ring, and like take over Mordor himself, right? Like yeah,
Right, right,
yeah,
yeah.
like he was it was him and Frodo in like all of Mordor at that
Yes.
moment. Yeah, so like he could have done it, but you know like it's not who he wanted to be.
Okay, so hey,
Mm.
let's jump
Yeah,
into our topic. So, just as a reminder, that topic was if you could pick anyone from the past or present to play a tabletop RPG with, who would you pick? So,
yeah,
I have a hot take about this question. I don't. Should I
okay,
start with the hot take or should
yeah.
we? So, here's my hot take. I dislike this kind of question, or like,
Jeez, okay,
so
that is a hot take.
yeah. I mean, again, code name Adam, if you're listening,
Yeah.
that this is I'm so glad you that we are talking about this question. But I will tell you, this is like a common icebreaky type question in like a work meeting or whatever. Like we're gonna go
Hmm.
around and say who you would like to have
Yeah,
lunch with, right?
yeah,
And so obviously it's a fun question, it's great, but it's really hard to answer
yeah.
in
Hmm.
anything other than like a flippant way, I think. I mean, because everyone's like,
Oh.
oh, I'd like to have lunch with Abraham Lincoln or whatever.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
like and this is maybe I mean I understand that the problem here is me
Yes,
overthinking
it
this
is.
as
Yes,
everyone's
yes.
going around saying Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King Jr. or something like that.
Mhm.
But uh, a person being really fascinating it doesn't mean they'd be a great person to like interact with.
Yes,
Like
yes.
what if you say would JD Salinger be a great lunchtime companion? Like
No, yeah.
you might you might love his work, but so that is why in the very jokiest of ways, I am finding this a weirdly difficult question even to think about. So that's my
Yeah.
hot take. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wow,
Reactions?
that is extremely spicy. But yeah, I think you're right on. Like, I mean, my brain was like, oh, like, wouldn't it be fun to like play a game with Tolkien? And like, no, right? You don't like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to do that, right? Because like,
Right.
you'd want to ask him a couple questions about Lord of the Rings, and then you'd just be sort of annoyed with him, like inventing his own language off to the side. Where you're like,
Right.
we're trying to like go through the dungeon, like. It doesn't matter what the runes are. They just say that we have to go left. Like, you know,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like I agree with you there. Yeah, but I mean, I think there is some merit to this. I mean, so part of it too, and like, so my hot take is right, like that, like the reason to play games is to like have fun with your friends, right? And like, so I mean, for me, like if you drop me on whatever some sort of actual play like Dimension 20 or something, like it just wouldn't be fun for me, right? Because like that's a different style of game.
Yeah.
Same like the same way, like right, if you invited Abraham Lincoln to your gaming table, it'd be like, oh, Mr. Lincoln, like it's your turn to roll initiative. Right, like you'd be
Right.
probably, it'd be hard to like just kind of treat Abe like one of your buddies, where it's like, yeah, like no, that's not how fall damage works. You know,
Right.
Mr.
Yeah.
Lincoln, right?
Did you even read the chapter on encumbrance? Like,
Yes, yeah. That said, though, I think I would want to play with a bunch of authors, and I'm
hmm.
not sure exactly who the authors are. Like my mind went to like the American greats, like you mentioned Salinger. Yeah, like the American greats. I'm putting that in air quotes of like, yeah, the canon authors from the early 20th
Yeah, I
century,
know
right?
you're a huge fan of the canon, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
you know how much I love the yeah
Yeah.
the Western canon of mostly depressed middle aged white men. Yeah, but like playing with Salinger or like playing with like Hemingway, like some of those, I think that could be fun to explore because I have a sense that a lot of them were sillier than they let on,
Hmm.
in some of their important works of literature. Right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I think that could be pretty fun. You know, but also just like playing with people that are like kind of interested in story, right,
Yeah.
and stories and stuff. So a question for you is like, would you want to play with like Gygax or any of those sort of early D&D people?
Yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
So I was going to say something along these lines. I have always enjoyed it when I get a chance to play with like the creator of the game that we're
Mm.
playing. So at various Gen Cons, I have sat at tables with people like Ken Height or, you know, some other people that I really, really respect their game design. And it's like a neat experience to see them working with their own material. You know, they know better than anyone else what experience it's trying to create. And so that's always a privilege. That said, you know what, I think when you go back further into history, you know, role playing is just such a like a different endeavor in a lot of different ways. You know, it would probably be an absolute blast to play in a Gygax run, you know, funhouse dungeon type of
Yeah.
thing. You know, so yeah, I mean, for sure that would be fun.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting thing. I played at a convention in a Palladium game run by the guy who made the Palladium RPG, Kevin Simbita, how do you pronounce his name?
Hmm.
And that was it was the most blatant but not the only example of a of when I've played with someone, a game designer, and they didn't run the game the way that it's written in the rules. Like you
Interesting.
mentioned, like John Harper or whoever running Blades, and he didn't do some of the things you were expecting him to do.
Hmm.
um, and like in the case of this one, when we were playing Palladium, the actual play was this like not quite freeform, but it was really just a lot of improv and a die roll thrown in there every great now and then, which I promise you
Huh.
is not the impression of the game you would get if you read the rules, which are
Yeah.
very much like you there's a plus 3% penalty to whatever's.
Hmm.
So I guess if I could play a game with a designer, it would be with a designer who runs their game like in an idiosyncratic way that's like way different than the way the game suggests it should be run. So
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you're not you're not mentioning anyone by name, but like yeah, you just kind of want to find game designers that that don't know how to play their own game.
exactly. So if you
Yes,
know
yeah,
someone who makes no, and
yeah.
I don't even. I mean, I'm just rambling here.
No, I think that's really interesting because it's like there's something about I think designing a game that makes you think about games in a different way, and like yeah, I think it would be fun to sort of like well let's yeah taking Gygax and being like okay well you're not allowed to use any of the D&D rules like yes
Yeah.
let's see yeah yeah I guess
Here's what I
oh
would
god
bet.
yeah
Here's what I would bet if you played a game with Gygax, he would not use encumbrance
mm,
table or
no
the weapon armor type penalties table or anything like that. And
yeah
that's the stuff that it would be most exciting to see is like, here's this person that made this toolkit. Which of the tools from it do they think are the ones that actually are the most fun to use, right?
yeah yeah and it'd also be like like who are you to argue with them about how
Right.
to
Yeah.
play D&D correctly it's like well yeah I mean you are like everybody is allowed to play D&D in the way that they want to but yeah that's really interesting yeah I don't think I'd want to play with Gygax the thing that I keep on thinking about with this is right it's a selfish question but I'm sort of selfishly thinking like it would be really a really neat experience to go back and play with like my childhood friends.
Hmm.
Right? And, like, I don't know if I'd wanna play, like I don't know, right? Like, in some ways, a lot of games that we play are sort of like we're just trying to get back to, like, who we were, I think, as a kid.
Yeah,
A
for
little
sure.
bit like some of that, like, childlike wonder, but I think, yeah, like, part of me thinks it'd be super fun to, like, run, like, a D&D game for, like, yeah, myself and my friends when I was 10, right? Like, 10 or 12 or something like that. Like, what
Yeah.
yeah, and just sort of like get to see that. I think that like side of them. Yeah, get that see that side of them again. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool. That might be a little bit melodramatic of an answer, but I think that's where I'm sort of landing on that.
No, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah. So we've hemmed and hawed with all sorts of ways of not really answering the
Mm-hmm.
question. So do you want to take a stab at like identify a specific person? You said Tolkien, but I bet
Yeah.
there's someone else. Let's each take a stab and let's throw out a
Yeah.
person, past
Are
or
you thinking
present.
like a notable historical figure? Like who would be?
Like, no, just anyone. I mean, it should be
Mhm.
notable enough that we know who it is, or you could explain to us who it is. I guess.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun to play with yeah, I think if we're talking about like notable historical figures, I think it'd be fun to play with some philosophers.
Hmm.
So I think it'd be really fun to like, I don't know, yeah, gather up some famous ones. Like I like Kierkegaard, for various reasons. So I think it'd be fun to play with him and to try to get him to like not be depressed, right? Like while playing, like
So,
yeah,
why can I poke on
yeah.
that? So, why do you like Kierkegaard?
Why do I like Kierkegaard?
Is it because of the ideas he presents or the way he presents them, or
More the ideas. I think like I think in my lower moments, I get pretty existential about stuff, but I think that he definitely gets that way. But I think there's also like there's some amount of like hope that it's going to get better in there, but
Mm,
it's still like very like I don't want to call him clear exactly about it, but like he does have a little bit of a clarity of like yeah, it's pretty bad, right? Like,
yeah.
yeah. So I think that's something that's always drawn me to Kierkegaard. Yeah, so I think it'd be fun to play with that kind of personality, or also like
Would
even.
he be running it or playing in the game
Oh,
with
that
you?
is a really good question. It had never occurred to me that any of these people that I'm talking about would be running the
Let's see.
game. Yeah. So
Yeah, Mr. Kierkegaard, you have an appointment at 3, and you'll need
yeah.
to read this 400-page rule book to run.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think him and maybe like gathering up a couple other people like Aristotle, like right, like
Hmm. Do you think that they would push the experience of role playing in a direction that just is really different than what
yes.
you expect?
Yes, and I think that's why I'm interested in philosophers in particular. Like, so I think like novelists would be trying to one up the story all the time, right? Like they'd be or trying to take control of the story. Whereas I think philosophers would get into the idea of like there's this rule system and like how can we
Hmm.
break it, right? And I think that would be a fun table to play at. I don't think I'd want to play a campaign with any of these people, but like yeah, but probably like yeah, a one shot I think would be really fun to like sort of see their personalities come out of like trying to interact with the rules, trying to figure out like just philosophically how they fit into those rules and like what they can break and what they want to take on and not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be quite a bit of fun.
But let's be honest, if Kierkegaard were running a 3-year campaign of riffs, you would sign up in a heartbeat. I mean, right?
Existential mechs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. What
Uh,
about you?
so it's interesting that you went with kind of thinkers and you veered away from storytellers.
Hmm.
Well, I was just thinking, like, so what makes a fun companion in a game? Like, right? What makes it a pleasure to play with someone? Besides, like, you like them as a human being, right? They're your,
Hmm.
your friend. And one of the things I really enjoy when people at the table are able to do, whether it's the GM doing this for NPCs or players doing this for these characters, is building a three-dimensional character out of interesting, funny, but not always funny, and like quirky and idiosyncratic details. And so when I think of someone who does that really well in writing, I think of like Stephen King. One
Mm-hmm.
of my favorite things about Stephen King, and if anyone who's read, Stephen King, I mean, I bet you'd agree with me. Stephen King has this incredible way of fleshing out minor characters, like a character who will die horribly in 3 pages.
Yes.
You will just spend 3 really fun pages in the mind of this otherwise unremarkable person, and that's like what makes it so cool. This person exists in the story just to get killed. It doesn't matter what their job is, it doesn't matter what they're worrying about, it doesn't matter what the state of their relationship or their marriage is.
Hmm.
But Stephen King is can't help himself, like, from asking all of those questions about even the most minor person in the story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
some of my favorite passages are these. There's this incredible sequence in The Stand. A third of the way through the book, the plague has like wiped out all of the world. And there's this like interlude before you pick back up with like the survivors who are the main characters who are going to go and do this epic survival stuff. There's this interlude where he just tells a bunch of little stories of people that died after the plague, but not of the plague, but because of what the plague did to like the world,
Yeah.
and for each of these people you spend like a couple pages getting to know this person, and then they die in like a sometimes comical way, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's the most memorable part of a 1200-page really good novel. So
That's fascinating.
anyway,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to just go on and on about Stephen King.
Yeah.
But that is a sort of trait I enjoy at the table.
Hmm.
I admire like my fellow players who can do it, and I think someone like Stephen King would do it really well
Yeah. That's great. So
if
who
you
would
could keep them from like hijacking the story. You
that
mentioned
that's
that, and that would
yeah.
be a problem.
Yeah, I think that would be a problem. Maybe I don't know. I guess. Well, yeah. I don't think I asked you. Would you be running the game, or would Stephen King be running the game?
I think where this could shine is either Stephen King bringing like the shopkeeper where you're buying a +2
Hmm.
acts from and making them a really like entertaining and like fully fleshed out character. So that it would be a good GMing trait. Although I also think of the times, that we have marveled, like, how when like the players will adopt a pet
Yeah,
NPC,
yeah.
and bring them into life in a way that is delightful for the whole table. I
Hmm.
could so PCs can do this too, and not just for their own characters. So
Hmm. Yeah.
that's all to say. I've not answered your question. Really, Mr. King, if you're listening, I'll run a game for you, and I also play in a game that you run.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's good. And I guess the there's sort of like a secondary question here of like what game would you play play with them? I think
Hmm.
I've been thinking, right, you'd be playing some sort of like fantasy game with them. But like I kind of wonder if you're gonna play with Stephen King, like would it be more fun or interesting to play Band of Blades with him or play The Quiet Year? Like what would be the game that you'd pick?
Whew. I think it would need to be a system that never interrupted you while you were on a roll with like
Mhm.
with this activity of making your character come to life.
Mhm.
So if it's a system where you can't improv a new detail about your character that wasn't there last session but that you thought of and it's really fun, even though it then that wouldn't be fun. But I think you can, in any game, if you approach it with the right attitude, there's nothing stopping you from doing what I described.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I guess I'm going to answer your question. I don't even really care.
Mhm.
But the thought of teaching Stephen King the like Blades in the Dark die resolution system makes me feel really nervous. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, so the real answer to this question is Gygax and like make him play 5th edition. see
yes,
see
although
how hard
you
his
know
eyes roll.
I would love to do is to playing Blades in the Dark or something, is to say, Mr. King, would you like to spend some stress to push for extra effect on that, or would you like to accept a devil's
Yes.
bargain
Yes.
for
Yeah.
because he would have a great, and then Stephen King would be responsible for like coming up with the devil's bargain
Yeah.
anytime someone at the table asked for one.
Yeah, yeah. It's that is probably like maybe a good way to think about this. Like who would take the devil's bargain quickest? Like that's sort of the historical figure that you want to be playing with. Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
I named a like modern historical a present person. I've been trying to think if there's like a great figure from the past who I think would,
Hmm.
and I'm really having a hard time. I mean, what springs to mind are the historical characters I find personally interesting, usually because they were brilliant weirdos. So
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft, I find him a really fascinating person. I really like Aleister Crowley, like he's a fascinating person.
Hmm.
Lovecraft might just like sit there and crank about how unrealistic the weapons rules were, and
Yes.
Crowley wouldn't let you get a word in at the table because he'd be talking about himself. So like,
Yeah.
I don't know that most of the historical characters I have a great fondness for are people I would even really enjoy like
Yeah.
being around. That's not like my criteria for do I find them interesting. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Lovecraft, and now I'm just thinking about like how interesting it would be to like revive these historical figures where they're sort of the primary inspiration for other games. Like playing like
Mm,
Call of Cthulhu with Lovecraft. Like what would he think of of
yeah.
that game? It would just be like, I don't know. But then like we're getting away from like playing the game versus just being like please react to this. Like I want to see
Right. Right.
see what
Yeah.
you're gonna do with it. But I mean, yeah, like would he be a good player of Call of Cthulhu? Like I don't know if he would be
Yeah.
necessarily because I think like part of Lovecraft is like the I don't know like that ambiguity. Like it's ambiguous, right? So like I don't know if he would get into the idea of like being the detective and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like, if we want to get into the weeds a little bit, Lovecraft's writing shows very little interest in like the protagonists and
Hmm.
narrators of the stories.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that what brought Lovecraft joy was, I mean, so in that sense, Lovecraft would really need to be the GM. It's hard to imagine him coming up with like an interesting player concept if I can Just a little
Yeah.
hot take for
Wow.
you, but yeah,
Yeah, you're just coming out of the woodwork here. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is good. We actually we do need to wrap it up. We both got
Oh
something
yes,
to get to. But this has been a super interesting question. I'm looking forward to hearing sort of what other people think about this. So by all means reach out and let us know like who you would answer for this question. So who would you want to play with, and then also what game would you want to play with them? I think that's sort of the combination that I'm looking for. But
yeah.
yeah, this has been good. I think I'm gonna keep like noodling on this question. Probably every time I read about anybody, I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to play a game with them.
Me too. So
Yeah.
yeah, if so, this one I can tell this is going to stick in my mind for a little bit. So
Mhm.
we'll make a little pact here. If in the next couple of weeks someone occurs to you, let's just have a brief revisit of this topic in a
Mhm.
future episode.
Yeah,
So,
for
and I
sure.
promise I do have to apologize for her rumphing about this question for like 15 minutes. But
No, that was
uh,
great.
okay,
It's good stuff. All right, yeah. Well, I think that about does it for us. So yeah, we Roll for Topic is part of the Roll for It Media podcasting network. Our sister show, The Splat Book with John Corey and Kyle Latino, can be found at thesplatbook.com. They just published, I think it's part two. I think this is maybe the final part of their actual play of the Lord of the Rings fifth edition One Ring game. Yeah, I'm most of the way through, I think, the first episode, and it's delightful. They have a handful of really good players playing on that, and Kyle is just an excellent GM. Right? He says that John's his favorite GM, and I think after this, I think everyone agrees that Kyle is pretty good on his own way too. His own right too. Yeah, so I mean, definitely go take a listen, if only for to listen to Kyle just like getting so into the descriptions of like the scene. You can tell he's just like the happiest little boy when he gets to gets to describe what's going on. Yeah, so that's really good. Go check him out at
you can
thesplatbook.com.
actually like am I right here? You can hear Kyle smiling, can't you?
Oh my goodness, yes,
Like
yeah.
yes, yeah.
It's really wonderful. Yeah, and you can tell the players are having a ton of fun too. So, but yeah, I think that does it for us. You got anything else, Andy?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao. Note the last names.
Yes. Remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.